I'm here with property management expert and director of Real IQ, David Faulkner, to talk about some very relevant hot topics which are affecting the industry as a whole and landlords right now. So first of all, David, thanks for coming.
That's great. Thanks for inviting me. It's great to be here.
So there's a lot of talk about changes to the Residential Tenancies Act at the moment. What are the key ones that landlords need to be aware of, you think?
Well, there's so much going on at the moment, Charlotte. It's hard to keep up with everything. So if you're a private investor, you're managing your own property, how they can keep up with everything. I mean, I'm an industry expert. It's what I study all the time. Even I struggle to keep up with everything that's coming out of the government at the moment. Now, some of the key aspects that the landlords have got to be aware of. Obviously, what's coming up soon is the insulation deadline, which is going to be on the 1st of July. Now, industry sources tell me that there's not going to be enough insulators to do all the houses in New Zealand. I think there's about before the deadline. Now, I think there's an industry capacity of about 50,000 per annum that they can do, and apparently there's about 100,000 plus properties which still haven't been insulated. So that's a real concern. And you know, technically, you're not going to be able to rent out those properties once you hit that 1st of July deadline, and those landlords may find themselves finding exemplary damages of $4,000. Then they've got the work orders that are going to be issued against them, so there's no getting around it. So that's probably the first thing. The next thing that we're seeing, which is going to be affecting the industry on a large level as well, is the Healthy Homes Guarantee Bill. Yeah. So we've seen the reform discussion documents come out around that, and what the standards, what that looks like. Now, what we think is going to happen, and we've been warning landlords about this for some time, is that they're going to have to make sure that the indoor temperature is going to be up to around 18 degrees Celsius. That's what we believe the standards are going to be set around. The reason why they're going to choose that temperature is because that's the World Health Organization guidelines for what an indoor temperature should be for a residential dwelling. Now, that means that landlords are going to have to be making sure that those properties are warm, are dry, insulated, that they're going to have some form of fixed heating. If there's going to be portable heating, they've got to be energy efficient. And it's a radical change for housing in New Zealand.
Insulation could just be the start of it.
Well, the insulation is the start of it, Charlotte. And it's not going to end there, so it's got to go a lot further. If you're a good landlord, then I don't really think you've got a lot to be concerned about, but there are going to be a certain amount of properties which are going to be affected by this. We estimate probably around about 200,000 of the 600,000 rental stock in New Zealand are going to have money spent on them to get them up to speed, to make sure that they're going to be compliant with the Healthy Homes Guarantee Bill.
Yeah, wow. What about pets and rental properties? I hear the government's thinking that tenants should be allowed pets. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, yes, and you touched on a very good point, Charlotte. We've got it's not just standards around housing. We're also going to see some reform around the Residential Tenancies Act, which probably give a bit more rights across to the tenants. Some may think it's going to go too far. One of the things that has come out with is that the government are going to state that tenants are going to have the ability, or they're going to have the rights to be able to have pets, and the landlords are not going to be able to say no, you can't. So, or if they do, there's going to be a valid, reasonable reason why they don't allow pets. Now, not everybody agrees with me on this, but I actually don't have too much of an issue with that. I think that as more and more families are caught into renting, in Auckland, renting is going to be a lifetime situation for many renters. So if you've got a family who've they own their own home and they want to get a dog, no one's going to say them they can't. So it should be the same, I believe, for tenants. Within reason. And there's got to be changes to the Residential Tenancies Act that protects landlords if a pet will cause damage, and inevitably pets will cause damage. So, you know, the landlord shouldn't have to pick up the bill for damage caused by a pet. That should be a tenant's responsibility.
Yeah, definitely. And also there were talks about changing the no cause evictions.
Yes.
So what does that mean?
Right, you've raised again an excellent point. And this is probably, in my opinion, the most controversial of the changes, and one which I've played around with in my own mind. And is it fair that tenants should be allowed to stay indefinitely at a house, and a tenant has to give, or a landlord can't get them out for no valid reason? Now, the reality is there's always a reason why you want to see a tenant leave a property. Whether it's, you know, there could be social issues, there could be threats, whatever, and if you want to give a tenant notice, you have to give a valid reason, and that may mean having to go to tenancy tribunal to prove that the tenant has breached the tenancy agreement. Now, we've seen a terrible case in Northland last year where 2 property managers were killed by a tenant. Now, the reason I'm opposed to this reform is that there's health and safety concerns about property managers going into relevant situations. They may feel uneasy walking into a property. The tenant may be a little bit aggressive. Now, how do you prove that in a tribunal? You're going to have to get statements. You're going to get the police involved. Police will just say it's a civil matter. They're not going to get involved in it. So there's risk. There's risk. So I'm all for protecting tenants' rights. Don't get me wrong. If a tenant has been given notice, they've already got a way through retaliatory notice clause that they can challenge that notice. So I don't think there's a reason to change.
What are the biggest mistakes that you see made by landlords?
There's very, very, very good question. If I could think of probably the biggest mistake that I see, not just landlords, sometimes I see property managers make, they get too emotionally engaged in decisions and they don't have a plan. Now, if you're a landlord, you're a business owner, and if you're a business owner, you've got to plan. So many landlords end up with just one management or one property or 2 properties. What property management companies, I believe the future of property management will evolve into is that we're helping landlords go from 2 to 3 to 4 to 5. So a lot of people, they'll get busy in their lives, they'll think they'll try and save some money, I'll try and do it myself, I'll try and cut corners. You've got to have a plan. You've got to have a cash flow projection, you've got to have a look at, say, right, this is what's going to be coming in, and then you've got to work out what's going to be going out and plan your business around that. And always have a bit of a contingency plan. Have a slush fund. You don't know, things are going to happen to property. Property depreciates. Things break. It's natural. So, and if you don't allocate money into a slush fund to reinvest back into the property, that's probably some of the most common mistakes I see made.
And not hiring a property manager, maybe?
Well, look, it's a very good point you raised as well. I mean, I was down in Christchurch where I saw Martin Hawes, who's a very famous financial planner, and he basically said, look, if you want to go mad, and you've got 10 houses, and you want to work full time and manage them yourself, that's what will drive you mad. If you've got X amount of properties, it takes up a lot of time to manage. And sometimes I think that this is it's another mistake that some landlords make. They don't actually put a dollar value on their time. And so if I go to a particular landlord and say, what's your time worth an hour? They may go $50, $100. Well, it takes, these are the calculations we work out. It takes approximately 25 to 30 hours to manage one property a year. Some will be less, some will be more. If you average it out over time, you've got to do your inspections, which will stipulate your insurance details, will stipulate how often you've got to do that. 20 to 25 hours, let's say. Right? Now, if you're pricing yourself at $100 an hour, if that's your time's worth, that's money that could be spent on a property manager, which is going to give you that time back. The other thing with that, the property manager is going to be taking the call at midnight on a Saturday night when the pipe bursts, not the landlord. You could be having date night, and then the phone goes and it's your landlord. So for me, look, I'm a landlord, I use a property manager, and I know the industry probably as well as anybody in the country, so to me it's just money well spent.
So on that, what would you say to look for in a property manager? How do you go about choosing one, apart from making sure that they're professionals, the rent sharp?
Well, I mean, you say that, I mean, there's, you've got to look at the backgrounds, and there's certain questions that you need to be asking of a property manager if you're thinking of choosing a property manager. I don't think fees going to dictate to a certain bit. It's probably the most common question that the landlord's going to ask is, what's your fee, what's your fee, what's your fee? But it's like you say, if I'm going to pick an insurance company, I'm not going to go to the CCC rating one. I want to get AA plus rating one, and that's going to probably cost me a little bit more, but I'm happy to pay that because I've got that peace of mind. Questions that you should be asking if you're looking at picking a property manager: how many properties are you managing for one? How many are the property managers looking after? If they're managing too many, there's a chance that they may burn out and they may overload. If they're managing too few, there's every risk that they may become insolvent, they're not making enough money, and that puts unnecessary pressures onto a company. What qualifications they have, how long have they been in business, what's their arrears like, all those types of things. You know, they're the type of questions that you ask. Ask for examples of the work, what the inspections reports look like, how often do you communicate, what's the most preferred form of communication, and you know, also you just, you know, do your homework, you know, phone around, see if you've got any referrals that they can, you know, any clients that you can even speak to, testimonials, things like that. So they're the type of questions that I would be asking. Certainly price will be way down on the agenda. I want to see the quality of the work first.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the investment's worth a huge amount of money, so I suppose you want the best people looking after it.
I mean, it's still, property management is still one of the cheapest property professions that you will find when you say, and this is what it goes down to. If I go around New Zealand and I ask property managers, if you're going to sell your time by the hour, what are you going to sell it at? And I hear ridiculous things like $20, $25 an hour, and it's too cheap. The amount of knowledge that you have to have with all the changes in legislation, Residential Tenancies Act, doesn't stop it there. Consumer Guarantees Act, Fair Trading Act, Human Rights Act. If it's a body corporate, Unit Titles Act and Unit Titles Regulations. It goes on and on and on and on. So, you know, it's certainly, I mean, price always comes into equation, but I want to make sure that the guys have got quality service first.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Excellent. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about today?
Well, no, I mean, there's sometimes people look at thinking, with all these changes, what's going on, is it worth still being a property investor? The question I have, and I can understand that we have seen a number of properties, landlords who probably get into a baby boomer age, they're thinking time to cash up, let's sell. If you're in that situation where you're thinking, is it right for me? And it's not right for everybody, it isn't. I mean, I accept that. Being a landlord can be challenging, but consider this: where else will you put your money? You know, property is still a solid form of investment, and I mean, as I said before, I'm a landlord. I'm just going to adapt to the regulations that come through. I'm not going to change. You know, I'm not going to sell my properties. It's a case of it's my retirement plan, and that's going to see me through in later life.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks for joining us today,
Charlotte,
David.
it's been wonderful. Thank you very much for inviting me.